opening are you expecting, David?
I'm thinking he's going to push his queen pawn on the first go. When Aronian has beaten Giri in the past, and I should mention he's beaten Giri a lot, their matchup's very, very one-sided. But when he has beaten Giri, it's normally through attacking him from the off and avoiding maybe mainstream opening battles. He knows that Anish is fantastic in the opening. He should guide the game. He normally tries to guide the game towards sharp, kind of complex, very tense positions with lots of pieces on the board. I remember looking at their stats from over-the-board chess a couple of years ago, and it was just incredible. I think he'd beaten Giri more than a dozen times, and Giri had nearly never beaten him. So, yeah, this matchup, I think, will favour Aronian if he can get out of the opening in good shape.
And Giri is known for hardly ever losing games, especially in classical chess. So, Levon Aronian, a little bit of his nemesis?
Quite possibly.
Yeah, quite possibly. Sometimes, you know, regardless of how strong we are, we always have that one opponent that, you know, just gets under our skin. Somehow the luck never goes our way. And, yeah, we will see whether Anish will manage to actually stabilise. And I know Anish, when talking about nemesis, Jordan Van Forest, who he's worked with for many years, has also been another one of those opponents he just can't manage to score against. And, OK, we've kicked off. It's not been a queen's pawn. Instead, we've seen a Sicilian, so Levon consistently going for the approach he took in game 2.
Yeah, and you mentioned the scars of that defeat against Aronian. Aronian, he's not letting that affect him. He's repeated the exact same opening we saw a couple of games ago, but Anish Giri has chosen a different setup for black. So black now has fianchettoed his bishop, his dark squared bishop. Black's kingside structure, they're rock solid. And Aronian, how is he going to sharpen up this game? How is he going to bring it to life? He develops his bishop. White wants to step the queen forward one square on the next go, maybe centralise the white rooks, and only wait until later to open up the centre. This is not regarded as the most ambitious approach for white. It's not maybe regarded as the most active or correct approach, but it's very much directed at the time format. First of all, the rapid format. It means that Anish is on his own already. He wouldn't have studied this for sure. But also it's directed at the opponent. He knows Anish, opening specialist, won't be able to use anything he's studied in the past. It's just about understanding now, putting pieces on good squares, seizing the moment later on. The game might sharpen up later, Jovanka.
Yeah, definitely will sharpen up later. I mean, for me, you know, just looking at the pawn structure, looking at the pieces, I'm thinking that the issue is actually on this light square bishop that white has sitting there on the c4 square, because normally it's tucked behind the pawn chain. It's not really a target. And can black, for instance, try and trade it off?
Yeah, start chasing it already.
Yeah.
Maybe bring the knight to the edge of the board. Attacking this bishop, this would be very, very logical. And actually, you can't really avoid the knight for bishop exchange, right? Because if the bishop runs away from the exchange, you only help black push pawns forward. You kick this bishop, you kick it back once again, and this bishop eventually will get traded off for a knight. I'm very surprised Anish didn't go for that, however. Maybe he just thought Aronian will ignore this and a knight for bishop exchange. It's not clear who this helps because suddenly white gets a semi-open file on the d file. White has two very strong pawns here, kind of keeping control over the light squares. But instead, Anish just pushed a pawn. And this is not kind of usually advised because this pawn could be a big target. I think the idea, if white had pushed the queen forward, attacking this pawn twice now, is that black can slide the king across and defend this square. However, watch out for this to be a weakness later, this black pawn. And Aronian, meanwhile, decided, OK, let's just slide the rook across, hinting at opening up the centre. Anish has to decide whether to allow a pawn push here or whether to lock it down. Quite a typical idea in this type of position would be to push a pawn forward. It looks a bit anti-positional, but you gain time against the white bishop. OK, he's done this, and when the white bishop retreats, I'm expecting this direction, because if you'd retreated the other way, you're just staring against a very well-fortified wall of pawns. But yeah, when the bishop retreats, I'm expecting at some point, maybe Jovanka's idea, go for this bishop or offer a trade of your own bishop. And play very much becomes a type of Italian game, a slower type of maneuvering position, but it's not a bad one for black. Black has a lot of control over some key squares.
Yeah. It does feel like it's going to be a battle between White's long-term trumps, which is kind of like good pieces, also good control over the light squares, versus Black's very flexible pawn structure. You know, he has a possibility, should he wish to try to trade off some pieces and also maybe initiate some play.
You could definitely imagine the knight jumping out the way and Black throwing some pawns forward. As you mentioned, very flexible. And this structure, we've been talking about world champions a lot today, but this is known as the Botvinnik type of pawn structure. You can have it with reverse colours from the English opening. And it looks odd because there's kind of a hole in the middle. There's an outpost for a white piece to sit on. But the key is that you stop any white pawn breaks. So you stop white from ever advancing forward in the centre. And OK, now Anish Giri, he wants to advance on every flank possible. He wants to push this pawn forward to maybe join its fellow pawns there on the 5th rank, but also to gain time against the bishop. You could definitely imagine a situation where, OK, the knight jumps in now, but you could imagine a situation where if white is too slow, then the black knight will retreat and, for example, look at all these black pawns pushing forward, gaining space, and white is very, very cramped.
That's beauty. I love that position for black. Yeah.
And yeah, I think because white is scared of getting cramped and all the black pawns pushing forward, if you're lacking space, exchange off a set of pieces. But downside, Jovanka, is that after a knight trade, suddenly you could definitely imagine black's pawns pushing forward, opening up some lines. Now the black rook sitting on a great file, potentially.
Totally. Yeah, I would do this in a heartbeat. I don't think I would pause too much for that. Also, black has the opportunity to expand, as you mentioned, you know, to have it all. You know, he can push that pawn whenever he wants to on the right side, but also, you know, why not grab as much as you can on the left as well?
Gain some time against this bishop.
Yep.
That would be very logical. I know Magnus Carlsen, he loves this type of pawn structure as black in the Sicilian, in the Spanish opening, in various different structures. And I was going to say, he will take this knight off in a heartbeat, and he will either push this pawn now, or maybe he'll gain some time against this bishop first, kick this bishop back somewhere, and only now push forward with this pawn. Magnus loves this type of thing as black. He's rock solid in the centre, and then he'll start initiating play on one side of the board. Yeah, I've seen many examples of this type of thing happen before. It's not to say that black has got the advantage or black is doing well necessarily, but black has a clear plan. For white, it's less clear. Maybe white's idea is to just ignore everything that's going on over there and push his own pawns to try and destabilise black's stronghold on c5. So, interesting game ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have to say, you know, I think white's position seems very unnatural. You know, it's the plans that you highlighted there. It takes some courage to just ignore all the action that's happening in the centre and just go, whoa, you know what, I'm just going to play on the left and confuse you a little bit. So I like Anish's position quite significantly. And I'm trying to, I have to say, one of my pet hobbies is to watch these two, it's on the board, is to watch players in their natural habitat, in their homes. And it just seems to be that Levon is not 100%, well, comfortable, and I say that, and he's played the plan that you highlighted, destabilise the centre.
So you said that before he played
before, yeah, that's
but,
right.
Has your opinion changed now that he played that move so quickly? And look at the clock times, he's very speedy. Is that confidence, or is that false confidence from Levon Aronian?
Yeah, this is the thing, you know, these guys play amazing chess. So that does inspire me to trust them a little bit, or quite a bit, actually. And, well, hang on a second, there's been a few committal decisions just now. I mean, I'm not sure about pushing that pawn forward and just locking down the tension.
Yeah, Anish Giri playing very quickly this last move. I'm looking at his air quality as well. Looks decent, very warm over there in the Netherlands. But, yeah, very committal decision you mentioned, Jovanka, and black's pawns pushing forward. The centre is now completely closed again, but black has gained space. Is he going to launch a pawn storm against the white king?
That's what I would think. Yeah, you know, you've pushed white, you pushed the f pawn. Why not go forward with the g pawn and the h pawn? And you know, no, he's changed. No. Okay, so maybe he's kind of saying, let's solidify the left side before we even think about initiating operations on the right.
Yeah, and maybe one downside behind pushing these pawns. Firstly, it takes a long time as black. You need to go step by step to push pawns towards the white king. I mean, this would have been logical to me, but one of the downsides is that white's pawn can now push forward, and now this black pawn is fixed. It's what we call a backward pawn. It can never march forward without being captured, and if it ever does march forward, it will just simply get taken, and black is left with two weak, isolated pawns on this side of the board. If you don't step this pawn forward, meanwhile, it will just be a clear target for white's rook, tying down the black bishop at home on its start square. So it makes some sense what Anish has just done, pushing his pawn forward, and Levon says, OK, it's still a weakness, I'm still going to target it, and it's, OK, I was going to say it's surely time for Anish to just ignore this side of the board now and initiate his attack by pushing pawns, but no, he moves his queen first. Anish is a perfectionist by nature. He wants everything to be nice and pretty before he starts attacking. But it feels a bit slow, this queen advance. I would have just rushed, I think. I'm not sure about you, Ivanka. Just push this pawn forward, maybe bring the knight this direction.
Patience is not my virtue either, you know, so I would have also rushed with the pawns. But, you know...
But the reason I like this queen on the d8 square is because, for example, if, let's say, white moves the bishop, now you move the knight, now the queen actually protects this pawn, so you're ready to push forward with h5, and then ready to throw all the black pawns towards the white king. Now where the queen stands, suddenly, if you push this pawn, it's not defended by a black queen ever. And look at what Levon Aronian's done. He's getting ready to throw pawns forward in the centre to explode open the position on the next go. I mean, looks like black is defending this square so many times, 4 times. 2 pawns and 2 pieces defending the square, but Aronian is not caring at all. He wants to open things up. And also, this pawn, it is attacked, it is vulnerable, but if it gets captured, suddenly the black queen would lose protection of this b pawn. So white's rook now would just be too strong.
Yeah, it's a critical moment, you know, as you've highlighted, white's threatening to blast open the centre. Alternatively, maybe even start looking at that weak pawn. So 2 weaknesses. Difficult to react to that one, actually. I mean, somehow or other, you would like the light square bishop to be somewhere on the board, just not where it is.
This black light square bishop? Yeah.
I mean...
I would have loved to, for example, if we go back again, I'm being too critical of Anish Giri's moves here, but if you push forward, if now white does the same, then at least you can make an argument for pushing your pawn again, and suddenly your bishop stands on a great square. I guess there are some tactics here. The white knight could jump out the way with a check. It gets a bit complicated, but this type of thing, at least you have a potential home at some point for your bishop. I'm just worried in the current position. Levon Aronian, maybe I'm just influenced by the speed with which he's playing. More than 15 minutes still, and getting ready to explode things open. If the position does open up, and if Levon has a 5-minute time advantage, it's only going to go in one way.
Anish, yeah, spending a lot of time, again, on this move. And, well, Levon Aronian, known to be a big gentleman in the world of chess. But we do love ourselves a little bit of drama. And we're going to talk about that. But first, this move.
Yeah, really interesting move. In the current position, Anish Giri decides, OK, he's pushed this pawn forward 1 square, 2 moves ago, he's going to push it forward again.
Wow.
It looks like all the top players are forgetting that pawns can move 2 squares forward on their first go. But the reason is, now that the white rook has been lured away to this square, the white bishop is undefended. So, for example, if we see an exchange, then white doesn't have time to win this pawn because actually his bishop is attacked on a2. So rook takes pawn would be met by rook takes bishop, winning a piece. And that means that if you want to trade pawns, sorry, all my arrows there, you have to move your bishop out the way first or defend it. So this would cost Aronian some time.
All right. Well, now he's thinking, Levon Aronian, and I'm just going to bring us back a few months in time. There was a big Twitter drama in the chess world. Someone hacked Anish Giri's Twitter account, and we're going to talk about the response from Levon Aronian because he implied in this tweet, I think, that Anish Giri wasn't hacked, that it was Anish himself who wrote those tweets referring to a Columbo episode where, well, the murderer tries to help the police. I was very surprised when I saw this tweet by Levon. He usually always stays away from the big drama. Were you surprised when you saw this, David?
I was extremely surprised, and yeah, I mean, I'm still not sure what to say to this, to be honest. Most of the top guys, they kind of kept their opinions private. They didn't react to all the hacking and everything that went on, or the fallout. But yeah, I must say, I've seen a lot of Columbo episodes. It's pretty much every episode. Detective Columbo ends up befriending the
criminal.
the criminal,
Yeah.
the victim / criminal, and finding out. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what Anish thinks about this. I'm not sure whether there's been any bad blood between them since. Either way, it could be motivation for Anish to try and get revenge and try and show Levon who's boss here. But
Yeah.
I mean, what else is there to say? It's still a very touchy subject, I think.
Yeah, I mean, but talking about Anish, recently he was in Madrid with Magnus and other members of the Play Magnus group, like Jan Gustafsson, Judith Polgar, and they got along fine. So, I mean, presumably it's probably okay.
The drama is over.
Water under the bridge. Yeah, these things do happen when it comes to hacking, and also not being hacked. Also, I don't know. It's a complicated scenario.
Yeah.
But okay, we do have an interesting move from Levon, because out of all the moves, I was not expecting that one.
Yeah.
To retreat the bishop to the starting square, switch angles. Nope. Didn't cross my mind.
It's as if these top players are just showing off now. It's just they think they can get away with anything. They can break all the rules. They can move a pawn 1 square forward. Next move it again. They can retreat their pieces to their starting squares. As Jovanka mentioned, it's just changing angle, changing direction. And if we jump in, we can see why this mysterious bishop move was made. This bishop actually gets in the way. I think that's the issue. It gets in the way of the queen. The queen wants to support her pawn on the d3 square, and maybe wants to support it pushing forward, and by retreating the bishop, now the queen does support this pawn. For example, pawn to d4 is definitely on the cards on the next turn. It's exploding open the centre if that does happen. Also, the bishop stepping back, as well as that pawn push, you could see the bishop land on this diagonal, and actually it has a whole bunch of targets if it does find this square. So really, really clever. Whether it's good or not, I'm not so sure. This is definitely not a game that I'll be showing any students, though. Trying to figure out the rules of chess, where to put your pieces, how to push pawns. No. But interesting stuff, nonetheless. I think Giri's problem, though, is what to do. You want to, as Jovanka mentioned, improve this bishop. Okay, you want to improve it, but how? That's the question. Instead, he moves his rook across, defending this pawn, but that feels a bit slow, and is now the moment for Levon Aronian to explode things open in the centre. I think it might be. Black has not completed development. White's pieces look a bit clumsy. But if you throw your pawn forward in the centre after a whole bunch of exchanges, it just feels like after this pawn push, Black's queen is just getting kicked around. And suddenly, wherever she goes, wherever she hides, White's queen might land on a decent diagonal soon. The white bishop might come out to this diagonal. Maybe this was his plan all along. At the very least, you could recapture this pawn in the centre that you sacrificed just a couple of moves ago. It's double-edged, but it looks good for White.
Looks great to White, to my eyes, especially because, say, the queens come off in this final kind of position. You can just see that very strong central pawn that White has is just going to control and dominate the game.
Yeah, this pawn just looks fantastic. And yeah, it could well push forward on the next few moves. Looking good for Aronian.
Yep, certainly looking good. And whilst Aronian is considering whether to bite the bullet and just launch that pawn forward, well, we can see that Levon is playing from his home in Armenia. But OK, he's gone for it.
Yeah, big move. The game's speeding up, livening up, and probably in Aronian's favour. Still a big time advantage as well, 3 extra minutes on the clock.
Yep. Definitely, and I was just going to show, this is a very exciting game, and it's really nice to share everyone's watching from home, their excitement, how they're following the show. And we have Cosmon, who is watching from Barcelona.
Ooh.
Whilst cutting some jamon. Well, enjoy the good food. And OK, so we have a trade of pawns, and the line that you mentioned, David, is probably going to occur. White has to push the pawn and attack the queen. What else to do?
Yeah, push it forward. Very logical.
Gain time.
Quite strong.
Yeah. Spring forward with the pawn. And, OK, so Levon doing good things. He's taking his time, not being too rash, but he should do that. And then Smagnalito is also watching us from home. from South Africa.
Ooh.
And is also cheering for Mamedyarov. And, OK, the pawn has stepped forward, attacking the queen. And Anish decides to move the queen to the c5 square, just there keeping contact with the black pawn in the middle of the board.
Yeah, actually, I think this is a much stronger move than the one I suggested in the previous variation, because now the white bishop, the white dark square bishop, cannot go to the edge of the board onto that fantastic diagonal. Now the black queen controls that key a3 square. So white's bishop at the bottom of the board now, struggling to find a good diagonal. So temporarily, black is one pawn up. Maybe we can show just one variation that I'm not so sure Levon Aronian should be tempted by, but if he does, for example, capture this pawn in the center with his queen, then after a queen trade, then I think white still has the advantage, but the pressure has lessened slightly. And with queens off the board, at least black can hope for a situation where he can maybe give up a pawn and survive a difficult endgame. I do think that maybe Levon Aronian, just style-wise, his best chances lie in the middle game. Here, actually, the more I look at it, the more I think it's great for white. White still has this very strong passed pawn. There's also a target on the b5 square, thanks to this pin on the b file. But yeah, in the meantime, black's piece is just not great, not active at all. I was going to say that this might be a mistake, but maybe this still maintains a safe advantage. Instead, if he wants to be more ambitious and maybe more characteristic of Levon Aronian would be to maybe move his bishop out the way, take this pawn with the bishop, gaining time, keeping the queens on the board, but also getting ready to gain time using the rook, trying to attack the queen and maybe break through to the 7th rank if possible. It's very, very sharp right now. This would be the risky option, keeping the queens on the board, but higher risk, higher reward, potentially. If he wants to play it safe, Levon, he might trade off the queens by taking this pawn back now.
Oh, we should take a bet. What do you think he's going to go?
I think he'll keep the queens on.
I think he's going to keep the queens on as well. OK, but I have to go opposite. So, you know, queen takes pawn.
I'll let you go first, and then I would...
You can bet on the same.
Ooh, okay.
Oh, OK.
This doesn't necessarily change too much. He trades off a set of pawns here. I'm assuming Anish Giri is going to take back with a pawn. You could make an argument for taking with the rook, potentially, but structure-wise, this pawn is maybe not as good as a potential pawn on the b file compared to now, where it's further advanced, maybe stronger.
Yeah. But when it comes to, like, this rook trade, you know, it's quite a key moment for me because, you know, would that rook sitting on b1 be a sleeping giant? Like, it might not be great now, but later on, you showed some lines where rook could possibly come into the 7th row, and that one could be the culprit.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. Maybe now trading, you might not have a great pawn here, that isolated pawn, but OK, he does take with the pawn, but trading off these rooks would be maybe a small gain for black. Here, Jovanka, just in the theme of putting pieces back on their starting squares, would Aronian put his rook back in the corner, threatening maybe some bishop jumps to this long diagonal, using the rook indirectly to protect this square. That would have been cool, seeing a bishop retreat to its start square and then this piece back to its start square. But, OK, we don't have that dilemma to face. Pawn takes pawn was played, and it's our bet again.
Yep, on the board.
Oh, you were right. Oh.
Would you believe?
Have I ever won a bet against you, Jovanka?
I think you have.
If I have, it might have been one bet. You've won about 100 now.
You need to hire Jovanka to choose our lottery numbers. You are great at these bets.
Well, I was actually doing the same with my co-commentator, Norway Chess, you know, and I would win as well.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show, you know, I just think there's intuition and there was no calculation behind it was just going for opposite David.
Yeah.
That was it.
Intuition is good. But meanwhile, so Levon Aronian, he has taken the safe approach, offering this queen exchange. OK, first there was an kind of a trade of pawns, which doesn't change the nature too much. But Anish Giri, he needs to find a solution. Once the queens do come off, and I think they will come off, he needs to get the black pieces active. Black's bishop, light squared bishop, still at home asleep. Black's dark squared bishop just pointing against a very strong white pawn. Black's knight not on a great circuit. Anish, you just have to take the queens off. Surely. No, he doesn't take the queens off the board. But this black queen is in no man's land now, and she's going to lose a lot of time.
Totally.
I'm shocked by this one, I must say. I thought queens coming off was a guarantee. Maybe Anish didn't want to suffer in a kind of position where he's only playing for a draw. It would have been a 2-result game, a white win or a draw, if the queens had come off. Here, by keeping the queens on, he wants to play for 3 results, but This is playing with fire. The white bishop, dark square bishop can move. The white rook can step up one square, attacking the black queen. You gain so much time against this queen either way.
Yeah, I have to say it was my natural instinct to actually just move the dark square bishop. You know, line it up with the queen and then start using the one of those rooks to just come in and start taking control of the open C line. It looks great for Levon. Yeah. And
feels like Anish just desperate to keep the queens on the board. He's going to kind of give away 2 or 3 tempi, 2 or 3 moves just to achieve that. And in chess, that's not really how it works. Every move has such a high price. And yeah, we see the evaluation bar did react as well. And sometimes we disagree with the evaluation bar, but here I think we can understand why. I think Anish, he just made that move for psychological reasons, for practical decisions. Yeah, I know for a fact, if this was over the board chess, classical time control, he would have traded the queens and just defended that or tried to defend that endgame. And Aronian counter-attacking.
Yeah, a nice little counter-attack there. I like that move, actually. OK, yes, it changes the nature of the position. You know, suddenly black might have 2 bishops against a bishop and a knight, but white's pawn is so strong.
Yeah, white's central pawn, that is the potential killer, right?
Yeah.
That's the potential key to the position. And just to show what's just happened, we were shocked that that Anish Giri didn't trade off the queens. Firstly, I was shocked that Levon Aronian offered the queen trade, and I was even more shocked that Anish didn't take it off the board. At least here, maybe you can hope to defend this endgame, even if you lose a pawn as black. At least all the pawns will be on one side of the board. Still no easy breakthrough for white, but keeping the queens on allowed Levon Aronian not to attack the black queen as I thought he might with a rook stepping forward, but counter-attacking, ignoring the threat against this bishop in order to create a counter-threat against this undefended knight. So queen takes bishop now would simply be met by bishop takes knight, a fair exchange, and suddenly, after the black rook moves, I think this is just going to end in disaster for black. If you look at the black king, only one defender around it, and that defender is about to be traded off on the next turn. This would be disastrous. Also, black's queen miles away from anywhere useful. Instead, what else for Anish Giri in the current position? Do you defend this knight? Maybe you can move the knight, attacking the white queen. Where will Levon Aronian put his queen then?
Yeah, that was a nice
Maybe
option.
That's the question. Where does this queen go? I mean, this bishop is still under fire as well. Do you step her 1 square forward, but then you walk into an attack from this black bishop, which finally moves, gaining time?
Or maybe you can just offer a queen trade. Since
now you offer the queen trade. Yeah, going back this way maybe.
Go.
Yeah, and I guess you have activated this bishop. You are gaining time against the black rook if the queens do disappear. And Anish clearly trying to avoid the queen exchange. Maybe Levon will force that queen trade in this manner. I was also wondering if you can keep the queens on with a move like this one, dropping it back into the corner, just with this nice, weird formation. But yeah, it looks like, at least from what we can see right now, this is Anish's best try. Maybe you can move the knight in the other direction to attack the white queen as well. Maybe there's an argument for this one.
Yeah, I thought the knight wasn't that stable, so I was looking at radical moves, like, you know, actually being really flashy and pushing the pawn forward with the same idea of going...
and this position, pushing a pawn forward, hoping for maybe bishop takes, and then...
It doesn't work.
Yeah. This would maybe be OK, but it wouldn't work here, I guess, for... Well, I'm not sure. Why wouldn't it work, Jovanka?
I don't know. I was thinking too many pieces are hanging.
Yeah, it feels a bit weird for black. Like, this queen is disconnected from her army. This knight is loose. This rook is undefended. But still some hope. So Anish Giri in the current position is this one after the bishop moves. He needs to deal with this knight. He needs to move it or defend it. And just as you say it, Jovanka, you should really play guess the move every game. You push the pawn forward.
Look at that, the bar's like, that's losing. You should not have played that at all.
But it's a human solution to a difficult problem.
Yeah. OK, so why does the bar hate it so much? So there must be a refutation.
So both bishops are under attack right now, this bishop and maybe this bishop as well.
Yeah.
And, yeah, how do you deal with it? I mean, first thing that comes to my mind would be, OK, Levon actually moves his bishop. I was going to say step forward with the rook, hitting the queen, at least guarding one bishop, but Levon guards one bishop by gaining time and also hitting the queen. And wherever the queen goes, again, I'm not sure where really. If it retreats, for example, maybe now you can either consider taking this pawn, using some tactics, or you could just step back, and these bishops still on great squares. It's unclear. I'm surprised the evaluation bar is so far in white's favour, but maybe there's something very strong here. Maybe in the current position, attacking this queen, maybe at some point this pawn is just going to drop.
Yeah. And also, you kind of called it a few moves earlier, that black queen is going to get chased around the board as well. And with every time that she does it, it's going to be white improving the pieces. So
Don't see a safe square for the black queen,
yeah.
essentially. Maybe the black queen can go kind of back along the diagonal to the f5 square, but oof, it just feels a bit clumsy. And like you said, it just feels a bit loose, black's position. And also clock times, Anish, he's not great in time pressure compared to some of his kind of elite rivals. So 3 minutes, that is very, very scary times for Anish Giri fans.
Yeah, and he retreats his queen, probably to a safer square, but this does allow some captures. And goodness me, Levon is playing super quickly.
Yeah, Levon Aronian trusting his instincts, and white's bishop has fallen, but he got a knight in return. And also remember that black b pawn, it's dropped, it's off the board. And wow, is Levon Aronian just not thinking? Is he kind of levitating the pieces, the mouse? Because he reacted instantly to Anish Giri's attack on his queen. He dropped back, the black rook now under fire.
Isn't the rook going to fall?
Yeah,
I mean, bishop. The big threat is for the light square bishop to swoop all the way and give a check to the black king. Yeah. How do you get off that poisonous B line? You can't.
Yeah, we have to show this, Ivanka, because in the current position, if, as you mentioned, the rook is attacked, if you drop back, then this piece is loose. That is a check, getting the bishop out of the way, gaining time against the black king, and when the bishop is captured, white has time to go and grab the black rook. But the reason I'm so surprised that Levon Aronian is not even pausing is because here, retreating his queen, it was a very sensible move, but there are, for example, captures such as this one, taking a knight off the board, and if white gets greedy and takes the rook, then suddenly the black queen slides across, and whoops, I think actually white is the one struggling now to stop checkmate. This looks very, very strong for black. If you can't take this rook, you have to go and take the bishop. Yes, you're doing well. Yes, you have an extra pawn, but the game continues.
Yeah.
Black, at least opposite colour bishops, has some chances to save the draw. Can we see the players, though? We have to go back to the players because I think this is the only move. Bishop takes knight. How else are you going to survive? Has Anish Giri seen this? He was shaking his head a moment ago.
Yep, he's found it, and the computer confirms absolutely only move. And yeah, the rook has to slide away to the centre, get off the poisonous B line, and yeah, white's has a passed pawn, but as David mentioned, black will have all control of the dark squares, and of course will have the ability, is always hoping to establish a fortress on the dark squares.
Yeah, and big threat, the one you mentioned, same tactic. The white bishop wants to jump out the way with a check, and the black rook on the b4 square is loose. It would drop off. So big, big threat in the position. And he's shaking his head as well, meanwhile. What to do? Do you have to move this black rook to a safe square? Do you have to use the other black rook to defend it? He needs to do something. Anish Giri, 1 minute, pawn down, but...
Oh, look at him.
He looks devastated, but fight. You just got to fight. Yes, it's a bad position. Yes, it's a difficult one, but...
Yeah, you got to show some resilience. OK, I like your suggestion of doubling the rooks. It's an active move, and, you know, black can live on in the hope there's opposite colour bishops and maybe a trade of everything could happen. OK, instead he moves the rook to a safe square. And now it's a case of, if I were white, I would be thinking about just rerouting the bishop to a even better diagonal. But first, this is nice to push the pawn.
Too tempting. That white pawn stepping forward. It's 2 squares away from promotion. It's going to paralyse at least one of the black rooks. One of black's rooks is going to act as a blockader now. But how does white break through? That's the question. As Ivanka mentions, actually, that I think you're right. You need to, at some point, recirculate your bishop onto the same diagonal as the black queen and the black king. OK, first offering a trade of rooks. Oh, I'm not so sure about this. If you imagine the queens coming off, all the rooks coming off, opposite colour bishops, that might well be a draw.
Yeah.
So, OK, yes, you're exchanging off black's most active rook, but you're kind of helping black get some pieces off the board at least.
Yeah, that is true. The hope factor increases for Anish, but at the same time, he's still treading a very narrow path to safety.
It's the hope that kills you. That's what I've been taught. You get a glimmer of hope, and then it's ripped away. And
Okay.
Okay, a small trick from Anish Giri. Now the black queen is actually staring down at one of the white rooks. So if white's other rook moves, black's queen will come down and capture a rook with check. So just setting a small trap there. No rook exchange yet for white. That would be a huge blunder by Levon Aronian. But okay, he's trying to force one rook off the board. And he's going to achieve that. Both white rooks are staring down at this black rook in the center. A rook exchange is guaranteed now. Yeah, it's going to be so hard to build a fortress on the dark squares as black.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might have been possible if black had all their pawns on the light squares. I'm just thinking of some kind of blockade. But as it stands, you know, there's a soft point on the G6 square. That's a little bit loose.
Also, if you look at that one remaining black pawn in the white half of the board,
Yeah.
it's not really defensible long term.
Yeah, and you can't be 2 pawns down.
Yeah, 2 pawns will be too much. So a rook trade, white's queen steps back to recapture.
And, well,
It's going to be one-sided traffic.
definitely it's going to be threats galore. And
Yeah, looking bad for Anish Giri in this game. I have to mention also it's looking bad for Timur Rajabov in his game against Ju En-jun. So Ju maybe getting her first win in the tournament. And actually Timur Rajabov, he is one of the higher seeded players with the biggest drop so far to make it to the knockout stage, whilst Jeffrey Chong and Arjun Ergaisi are both now among top 4 who are most likely to qualify. So already we are seeing some big changes, and we also saw a move in this game.
Yeah, Anish at least protecting everything, threatening the white rook. He's trying to coordinate the black army now. If the black rook can, for example, sit on a dark square protected by its bishop, everything will protect each other. He's going to curl up into a little ball, Anish, and try to hold, try to say to Levon, you will not pass, you shall not pass. But yeah, I feel silly picking Rajabov as my favourite for the tournament now. He's struggling, really struggling. And
he really is struggling, yeah.
that would be a great result for Ju En-jun if she can finish him off.
Yeah. Well, we have seen today a lot of the favourites struggling a little bit. Anish Giri, definitely one of those players.
Yeah, and Levon Aronian struggling. First 2 games, losing. Now, what do you think, Ivanka? Second win on the bounce to strike back?
I think so. This is looking like a good position. And also when I look at the clock situation, I mean, come on, Levon has just over 6 minutes, whilst Anish 30 seconds.
Yeah.
That's not that much time.
Yeah, he should be able to find the kind of killer touch to this game to end all resistance at some point. It just might not be in the next few moves. As you mentioned, yeah, he'll build up the threats, he'll set the traps. Anish with 30 seconds in a really difficult position, he might be able to ward off the first wave or 2 of the attack, but long term it shouldn't be enough.
Yeah. He can make a few non-moves as well, just to stabilise the situation.
Levon.
Yeah. I mean, he has all the time in the world, you know. I'm just thinking, you know, like you kind of suggest, like overprotect everything, keep it up in a ball, curl up in a ball, and then slowly kind of switch diagonals with the bishop. And okay, so he moves his queen. I didn't want the queen to go there. I wanted to go into overprotection mode.
The white queen.
Yeah.
I guess he's maybe setting a small trap in the position. If we do jump in, I mean, Anish Giri now setting a small trap. It looks like white's about to win a second pawn. He can play rook takes pawn here. He doesn't do that, he takes with the queen. This would have allowed a check, a nasty check, and after the king moves, suddenly a nasty skewer, a pin on this line. But instead, Levon saw this, of course, and he said, nope, I'm not going to fall into that trap. I'm going to take your pawn with my queen instead. Allowing the queens off the board, that's not ideal, but it is a 2-pawn advantage. And does black have a fortress? The answer should be no. Black is 2 pawns down, and more importantly, this rook is extremely, extremely passive. So in the current position, it looks like sooner or later, white will improve the king, white will improve the rook, white will improve the bishop, and eventually the fortress should fall.
Yeah, it does look like that way, but still at the same time, I'm thinking in terms of the clock situation, it's now very easy for Anish to make some non-moves.
Yeah, that's great for Anish Giri. He can just wait with his bishop now forever, but Levon Aronian is coming with the king. Zigzag forward.
That is a lot of moves with the king.
Yeah. It's a snake. That's not a king. It's a serpent king. Okay, so the rook comes forward 2 squares. You know, that's a nice kind of idea, just to give a few checks. And while Levon just carries on with the threats, moving his rook to an open line. And okay, there's nothing for Anish to do other than just switch backwards and forwards with the bishop in order just to hold the position tight. You know, he's not looking at anything ambitious. It's just maintenance mode.
Yep, and meanwhile, Levon Aronian pushing pawns. What do you think of this one? This pawn push is a bit committal.
It is a committal. I've learnt that you've got to be a bit cautious about pushing pawns. You don't need to rush with it. You can torture your opponents for a lot of moves before you can make that commitment.
Yeah, it's a big commitment for white. And now, the reason I don't like this pawn push is because you can't check the black king. Black's king is on a really safe square. And
yeah. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to check the king, as David mentioned, and also it's very difficult for pieces to come forward and just penetrate, because what Levon needs to do is just create 2 weaknesses. He needs to overstretch Anish Giri.
And he has a lot of time to find the moves that he needs to find to win this
which
game.
is why he didn't need to rush with such pawn moves. I mean, he could have waited in reserve, kept Anish guessing whether, you know, he would push that pawn 2 squares, maybe he would create a pass pawn in a different angle. It wasn't necessary.
yeah, I just really, really hate this decision. If Levon doesn't win this game, it's because he pushed this pawn 2 squares forward. Imagine if he could get the same position just with his pawn 2 squares back, and he could slide across with a rook check, kicking away the black king. He would just win this game immediately. And now, okay, he's advanced his rook to a really nice square, but how is he ever going to kick this black king away? These 2 pieces are kind of fixed on these squares forever. Opposite colour bishops, you can't conquer the dark squares. And now, because you pushed this pawn, as Ivanka mentioned, you push this f pawn, you simply can't push the g pawn next to it, and you can't break through. You can't create a passed pawn. So, yeah, I think Levon Aronian, he might have blown his winning chances. Anish Giri, meanwhile, setting the traps. If the white king steps forward, maybe there'll be a rook check, and suddenly black is the one winning a piece. Black might be the one winning this game. So, yeah, it's all going wrong for Levon Aronian. A true grinder, a true endgame expert, I think, here. Of course, he's an endgame expert, but a true kind of patient kind of player here who loves squeezing out these advantages would never push this pawn. And, yeah, here we go. Anish Giri, in the current position, just retreating his bishop. This is maximum fortress for him. It's all about these 2 squares, and he's defended them. He's consolidated them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, OK, so Levon is going to try. I mean, I can see one idea potentially to break down the fortress, and that's just simply to relocate the bishop, move it on to another target, to the g6 pawn. But Black's rook is active.
Black's rook is extremely active, and I think this is the key. 2 defensive pieces are great, but you need 1 active piece to keep your opponent honest, to keep your opponent from kind of setting up the ideal structure, the ideal setup. And this black rook is going to tie white down to this pawn. It's going to tie white's rook down to the defense of this bishop. What else can you do? And again, if we catch up with the play, I just don't see how white is ever going to win this game. Maybe you could imagine the white rook coming the whole way across and behind and round like a snake. So I would stop this simply. I would move the black rook back, guard the 8th rank, and white is not doing anything.
All about the snakes in this game.
Yep, and the king tucks itself away. And I like David's suggestion for Levon. It reminded me of those old Nokia games. Oh!
Oof, he doesn't do that. Now, has he allowed the rook round? Has he allowed this rook? You mentioned the Nokia games. This is exactly what Levon Aronian would want to do right now. If the rook ends up on this square, if the rook ends up on the f7 square...
It's checkmate.
It's checkmate.
Whoa.
So it takes a while. Maybe the black rook will attack the white bishop in the meantime. Maybe it's difficult to set up, but already Anish Giri, with this last move, maybe showing a slight lack of danger, alertness. We will see. Is Levon Aronian going to try and come round now with his rook? I don't see a win, though, for white yet. If the rook does come up, maybe aiming to come round, black's rook will simply sidestep, hitting this bishop.
I agree with you, Ivanka. When David made his arrows with the rook, it looked like the snake game on the Nokia 32-something.
3210.
3210. It was my first phone, actually.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
It's also my first phone as well.
Great memories, actually.
Yeah. Okay. And, well, Levon did try to put his rook on the 8th rank, but Anish simply attacked the bishop, and Levon just moved it back. That's not really progress.
What do you think, Jovanka? Are we going to see a 100-move game?
Yes.
Yes. They're grinding like grandmasters. That's knuckling down, trying to squeeze out the win here for Levon Aronian. If he can grind out this win, that would be a huge momentum changer for him on the first day.
I ground out a win in May. It was so much fun. Oh, I couldn't believe it. I was sat there going, oh my goodness me. I got so into it, I forgot that it wasn't optimum that I beat my opponent.
Oh.
Because it was the first, because I play for a team in the National League, and I was playing for the second team, and I was playing against my first team, and they would have won. Yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible what I did to them. You know, they would have won like the whole league if I hadn't done, if I hadn't got so into the spirit of grinding.
Wow.
Anyway.
But beating a grandmaster, it's worth it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think about winning. I just thought about pushing my opponent to the limit. That was it. I did not think at all. I was like, okay, what are you going to do? And then, oh, maybe he has a draw. Oh, no, but what happens if he does this? And then I got such a buzz from it.
I can imagine. It must be the best way to win and the worst way to lose. Those grinding games like Game 6 and the World Championship match.
Yeah, it's definitely the most satisfying feeling in the world when you feel you've earned it physically, mentally, sat there for 6 hours, squeezed out the win. But yeah, if you lose one of those games, it's soul-destroying for sure. And I think that's the case for these two players right now. If Aronian wins it, it's going to be the most satisfying thing in the world for him. Maybe that will give him the confidence boost to win the whole tournament. But it would be devastating for Anish Giri just to lose this, especially after fighting his way back from the brink. Anish Giri was gone. He was dead and buried just 20, 25 moves ago. Suddenly, he's defending a position where maybe miracles do exist. Maybe fortresses, you know, like this one where white can't break through on the dark squares. Maybe fortresses do exist as well. And right now, big threat on the board. Black's rook wanted to go and take this white pawn on the e6 square, white's far advanced pawn. So that was defended by Levon Aronian. But the black king now can come back where it came from, maybe. There we go.
And it will do. And it's very important for black just to simply hold the balance, not get ambitious, not try to take any pawns. Just keep holding the position tight and don't break the patterns.
And Anish only has 30 seconds on the clock. Is it difficult for him to defend this?
Well, I think the good thing for Anish is that he's had around 30 seconds for a long time now. So he's in the rhythm of playing with little time on his clock. If he just reached this endgame with 30 seconds now, then maybe it would take him a while to kind of acclimatise, get in the right mindset to defend. But I think he's been doing a good job with little time.
He set a trap in the position, and white has to be a little bit awake here and can't be too energetic with the rook and put it on a dark square.
Ooh, that would have been nasty.
That would have been a little bit unpleasant.
Yeah, just to show that you can never relax too early. If white's rook had moved across, for example, defending its bishop, then after the black bishop comes forward, the white rook moving, then suddenly, whoops, black is the one checkmating the white king. White's king is actually really badly placed. This is a good example of that. But of course, Levon Aronian didn't fall for that one. If we catch up with the game, then we see still the status quo has been maintained. This black bishop and this black king are the star players at the moment. They are defending everything. And it's all about this white structure. Again, why did you put these pawns on squares where they're blockaded by the opponent's pawns? If Levon Aronian could have any move in the world, he would love to move this pawn backwards. But pawns don't move backwards. If he can push this pawn back one square, then he's able to push the pawn next to it. Yeah, this is why I think committing, he could have played around for 40 moves, tried to find a plan, and then committed this pawn. But I just think that was a hasty decision, and he stopped to think too late. I think Anish Giri is going to save this now. What do you think, Jovanka?
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance that he will save it, even despite the clock situation, because it's so easy just to maintain the balance, to maintain the status quo. The king is just going to step forward, can't do anything else, and then the rook is just going to slide. And, you know, he has to be a little bit on his toes. You know, he has to be aware of white's tricks. But because the position is so empty, it should be quite easy to spot them. And the rook comes, getting ready to give a few more checks to the white king.
Also, at this point, we have to talk about the 50-move rule. The last time a pawn push was made or a capture, and that was on move 46 for white. So already it's been 21 moves since the last, what we call progress, was made. No pawn pushes, no captures for 21 moves already. So another 29 moves. Without any of those things happening, Anish Giri will save the draw. The 50-move rule will kick into effect.
Maybe now is the time for the rook to go up to the top of the board and try to snake its way towards those pawns on the right.
Yeah, I think you have to, right?
You have to try something.
Now or never.
Yeah, otherwise you're not breaking through. And is it okay? He pauses.
Anish Giri frowned as soon as that move was made. Maybe he was scared of the white rook coming up to the top of the board. Do you think that's on Aronian's radar, kind of that snake-like effect coming round? Because
well, he threatened it once. He did it once, but then he kind of turned back and changed his mind. So, and Anish just keeps on allowing it. So then maybe they've just worked out, no problems.
Yeah, I think Anish Giri's defensive idea is to just continuously check the white king with the black rook, or to attack the white bishop with his rook as well. That's the key, having two defensive pieces and one active piece, attacking piece. Black's rook is really annoying for white to deal with. A rook trade, though, remember, will just end the game in a draw. So black's best piece, the rook, cannot be exchanged. That's what's so frustrating for Aronian. And Anish Giri, he's gained a bit of time, nearly up to 1 minute. He's surviving.
He is surviving, but a bunch of players has not survived in round 4. It was a win for Hans Niemann against Arjan Tari, a win for Sam Sevian against his fellow American. They are both 21 years old. Jeffrey Chong, who won all of his first 3 games, a loss in the final round. A win for Ju Wen-jun, the only female player in the tournament, against Timur Ajabov, and a win for Richard Report against the youngest player, Arjun Ergaisi. So far, all games have ended with a winner. But this one...
I'm still thinking Anish is going to draw this. At the beginning of this endgame, I said nearly no chance, because I thought Aronian would just tease him, create threats slowly, time the breakthrough at the right moment. But yeah, just going back to this one pawn push, the last pawn push that we saw back on move 46, white f-pawn stepping forward. That was the key moment. And now we've gone round in circles for the last 20 plus moves and 0 progress at all for Aronian. He knows it as well, I think, Aronian. He knows he's blown a big, big opportunity. Look how focused Giri is, though. If he defends this game, then massive, massive credit to him. That could be a momentum changer for him as well.
Yeah.
That's also a really satisfying feeling when you knuckle down, you know that your back's against the wall, you know you're struggling, and you save the game. That feels as good as a win sometimes.
Yeah, and actually, on the reverse, when you're in that situation and you let the win slip, it also feels terrible.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's... Because you've got no one... This is the beauty of chess. You've got no one to blame but yourself. You can take full responsibility for what you play over the board and the decisions you make and the time you use. So,
It is quite brutal.
Yeah.
You need some inner strength to start playing chess top level.
Yeah, I mean, it is brutal because there's no dice involved, you know. If we had some dice, we could kind of say, wow, you know, it's that fault. But no, as it stands, oof. Yeah, but it's fun at the same time because when you do win, you get such a buzz.
You also can only blame yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, okay, maybe you were losing, but then you set one final trap. And even so, you keep pushing yourself to the limits. And the beauty of chess is that every single position is different.
Yeah.
And you're always forced to work.
Yeah.
And, well, not much happening. Levon is just manoeuvring his rook and bishop around, you know, trying to find some way just to break through. I mean, I've been told by many in-game specialists that this is a good strategy. You just kind of bore your opponent to death. You kind of lull them into some false sense of awareness, and then you pounce with your trick.
Yeah, in general, that's a very good strategy, but Levon Aronian, he should have done that before pushing his f-pawn.
That's true.
Why not just manoeuvre round and round and round, and then push a pawn 1 square, and then manoeuvre around, then push a pawn a 2nd square, then you can torture your opponent forever. Also, this is the last game of the day. It's not as if Aronian wanted to win quickly to save energy for later on. he can sleep after this game. He should have been kind of trying to grind it out a bit earlier. I think he only switched to grinding mode now in order to win this game because he had to. He thought he could just win directly, he could do anything. But Anish is such a good defender. Anish, I mean, he had this reputation for a while of drawing a lot of games, but that's just because he was so good at defending.
And well, while these two experienced players are grinding this game out, we're going to talk to one of the younger players and debutant on the tour, Sam Sevian. Congratulations with finishing off with a win today.
Thank you.
What has today been like? How will you sum it up? Your first tournament on the tour.
Yeah, it's been really exciting. I've been looking forward to playing this for a couple of years now, and it's great to get a chance. My first game, I was completely winning, and I kind of botched it at the end when we both had no time, but I still felt like I was playing really well and kept the form going in the next 3 games.
Fantastic. And with 2 wins, you are currently in second place. The only player above you is your fellow American, Jeffrey, with 9 points. What's up with you young Americans today?
I mean, we've always been pretty good at rapid, at shorter time controls. Been playing it since 8, 9 years old, so it's not really a surprise to me.
I like to hear that. And I have to tell you, according to the guy who does all our stats, you are now one of the players, one of the 4 players most likely to make it to the knockouts. Are you already thinking about that, or will you just focus on the games coming tomorrow?
Well, I mean, this was just my first day. I do want to continue playing good chess, and I'll think about that on the 4th day.
Fantastic. And I want to mention, I talked to you before the tournament. We talked about the 50th anniversary of the match where Bobby Fischer became world champion. That anniversary is tomorrow. So as an American, will you feel a little bit extra inspired tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, especially with the rules this tournament has, it rewards winning more than drawing a couple of games. I will definitely be ready for the fight.
We wish you best of luck tomorrow as well, Sam. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we're also going to talk to Jeffrey Chong. First of all, is there any changes in the game, David?
In a word, Kaya, no.
The grind continues.
The grind continues.
So we are joined by Jeffrey, who is in sole lead so far in the tournament with 9 points. Maybe a little bit disappointed after the first, the final game here. But how will you sum up the day, Jeffrey?
Yeah, obviously it was a great day. Definitely couldn't have asked for better, starting with 2 blacks, and then was able to get some chances and convert those. So yeah, obviously last game was maybe shouldn't have lost that, but that's how it goes.
And starting the day with a win against one of the top players in the world, Anish, Giri, how much inspiration did that give you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, any win, honestly, in this event, especially the first one of the day, just carries over to the next, I think. But definitely against Anish with black felt even better.
Are you surprised with your performance today? We just talked to Sam, and he told us that, no, we've known this for many years. Even if we haven't played in the tour before, we know that we can play great in this format. So did you feel this was coming, or are you a little bit surprised about your performance?
Yeah, I mean, to echo a little bit what Sam said, him and I, we've been, playing a lot of rapid, even training together before. So we're definitely quite experienced and feel that we're well suited in the faster time controls. But that being said, I mean, today was certainly a great day for both of us.
And heading into day 2, probably in sole lead, will that put any pressure on you? How will you cope with that?
Not really. I mean, I think it's still very early. It's just day 1. I think there's 11 rounds left, so a lot can happen, and just hoping to keep it going.
Have you enjoyed today? Has it been fun?
Oh yeah, for sure. This event, I mean, I've also followed it many times, and it's certainly very exciting. So to be a part of it, it's great.
And I did ask Sam, and I'll ask you again tomorrow, being the 50th anniversary of the 1972 match when Bobby Fischer became world champion as an American. Will you feel some extra inspiration playing tomorrow?
Now that you told me, I probably will. Yeah, I mean, Bobby, he's arguably the best American ever. And certainly if I can try and channel some of his play, I'll try my best to do it.
Are you inspired by him? Is he one of the players that you find some inspiration in? The style he had, the way he attacked the game?
I mean, obviously, I've seen a lot of his examples, but I can't say that he was truly, the most, like the main guy for me, the main role model. I think I had some other players even. Out of Americans, I'd probably try and model my play off more fresh players.
Such as?
Well, I mean, Hikaru, Fabiano.
Fantastic. Well, that definitely seems to be working. Jeffrey, congratulations on a great day, and best of luck tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us. What a day he had. Jeffrey is in sole lead right now with 9 points. But these two of the more experienced guys, have been struggling a little bit today. And this grind is still going on. Can Levon win it?
Well, we've jumped in again at a critical moment. We're on move 92 right now. If White's 96th move is made without any captures, without any pawn moves, then it will be a draw. Levon Aronian now has 3 moves to win a pawn. His idea is to go to the top of the board with the white bishop to the e8 square and win the pawn next to the black king. He might be in time. This is the big question. Imagine if he wins a pawn 1 move before that hammer falls and the 50 move rule happens. I think he's going to do it. This is move 94. And a pawn capture has happened 1 move before the draw was confirmed. Levon Aronian, he's got a chance now.
Wow.
We saw a pawn exchange. Black's bishop winning a pawn due to a pin against the white king, but one of the black pawns has fallen. And look at Anish Giri's face. I think he sensed he was close. He was so close, 1 move away from a draw. And that can be heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It should maybe still be a draw with best play because White's pawns, the 2 pawns on dark squares are big targets, but all the chances now for Aronian to go around again and grind it out again. We could be here for 150 moves even.
Wow.
even more.
Suddenly I'm excited. I'm starting to warm up today. It's the last round of the day, but I'm awake.
thinking we might see 200 moves.
200 moves.
We might see the longest game on the tour ever.
What's the longest game on the tour ever?
Yeah,
David probably knows.
We've had a couple of 150-ish move games.
Never close to 200, have we?
Don't think close to 200 yet. That's very, very rare in chess. Meanwhile, big moment for Anish Giri. Can he defend? The problem for Black is his remaining pawn, Black's pawn, is on a light square, could just fall. I think Aronian wants to win that if he can for free. He doesn't want to give up one of his own white pawns for the black pawn. So he has to be a bit clever. If you take it now, one of your own white pawns drops.
Yeah, there's a big kind of trick, right? In the right kind of circumstance. Say, for instance, if White were to, if we can pull up the board and just say you grab the pawn with your bishop and Black takes. OK, so maybe you can even do it here.
Yeah.
You might be able to go rook takes pawn, and then you just give up after rook, bishop takes rook, king takes, and then now you take the pawn, and then you just rush as quickly as you can to the corner of the board, and there, despite White being a bishop and a pawn up, because it's the wrong colour bishop for that corner, it's just a draw.
Yeah.
There's no way to budge the king off the dark squares.
Exactly. Due to stalemate ideas, this king will stay nestled in the corner forever. And you're right there, Jovanka, that would have ended in an immediate draw if he had grabbed this pawn. And look out for that to happen all the time. Yeah, that kind of scenario where it's bishop and kind of pawn of the wrong colour, wrong promotion square, it will be a draw. So that's the problem for Levon Aronian. He can win a pawn, but he's got to avoid this endgame forever. It's going to be a constant theme, so watch out for that one. As Jovanka mentioned, this idea of the rook at some point taking this pawn. Not that pawn, me and my arrows again, this pawn. So, yeah, right now, Aronian has to deal with this in the correct way. I like what Anish Giri's done, actually. He's put his rook on a defended square, defended by his bishop. And this is important because, for example, after a rook check, if the king steps forward, another rook check, Black can actually safely walk into the firing line and take this pawn. Normally, you can never, ever dream of walking into a discovered check. But when the rook moves, yes, it's a check. You move your king. Suddenly we see why it's important to defend your rook, because now this would just be a fair rook trade. You need to make sure you win material for free here. And look at the evaluation bar. It says 0.1, despite the fact white has 2 extra pawns. That means Anish Giri has found the ideal drawing setup. He's using these pieces to defend each other on dark squares, both pointing towards this pawn. And meanwhile, the white pieces just clumsy. They can't get back in the game without allowing that kind of nice trick.
And now we have a situation. What is white going to do with the rook? I mean, it's under attack. You have to keep an eye.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Aronian
What is
shaking his
this?
head.
I mean, can you just grab that rook?
Ivanka, we're going to see that endgame that you mentioned, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, maybe not. The black king now steps back. I was going to say you could go for that endgame, but white's pawns are not on the H file anymore. And Levon Aronian, he gave up his rook for a bishop, partly because his rook was trapped, but now white has 3 pawns. They should easily be stopped, though, by the black rook and king. Black's rook will stop the white king from getting active if it can, and black's king will be a great blockader. What do you think, though? Good practical try? He's changed the nature of the position. Sometimes that's a good idea.
Well, it's really difficult to see how white is going to actually get the king active.
White's king is just stuck on the edge of the board.
Yeah, like white's pawns are just too closely connected. The black king is doing an amazing job at looking at the both of them. And, OK, he steps back.
Yeah, if white's pawns were further apart, so, for example, if one white's pawns was on the C file, one on the G file, white's king would have enough space in between them, like you say, to sneak through. But white's king does not have enough space between the 2 sets of pawns to march through. So, and look at what Anish Giri is doing. That's a great technique, cutting off the white king from stepping back now. And I think, judging by his previous moves, he's going to step the black rook up to the 5th rank to stop the white king marching forward again. But yeah, at this point, it should be a draw. Black's king will blockade on the dark squares. Black's rook will cut off the white king for eternity.
Yeah.
Well, these two are grinding, and I'm just going to remind you, this is the first tournament in our FTX Summer of Chess, and the best fan experience you get if you sign up for our free key. And on the bottom of the screen is a QR code, or you can head to ftxcryptocup.com to sign up for your free key and join a community with a bunch of competitions, a bunch of exclusive content, prizes up to $100,000. So go ahead and sign up to join in the community. All right. Any chances for Levon here?
I think not.
I think not. Also, I was just wondering, is this one of those endgames where you could just give up the rook and kind of...
In some situations, maybe.
But OK, you need
aim
to
for
get
some
rid of
stalemates.
one of the double pawns, right?
Possibly.
Yeah.
I don't think you can give up your rook for any of the pawns right now. There wouldn't be enough stalemating ideas in the position, but the key is that the white king's just never stepping forward. OK, I'm slightly surprised by this one, because now the white king can step 1 square forward. But the problem is, when the white king steps forward, the black rook's just going to check from behind, and there's nowhere safe to run.
And there's nowhere to hide as well. You can run, but you can't hide, as the song says. I don't know, what song was that?
Oh, we need Simon with us to tell us.
Yeah, we do. Simon is the fountain of all knowledge when it comes to songs. And you as well, though.
Me less so, unless it's 90s pop. And yeah, the white king has no safe haven. And look at Levon Aronian's body language. He's accepting the fact, he's coming to terms with the fact that there's no way to win anymore. The white king has no shelter, and he gives up one of the pawns. I mean, 2 were basically the same as 1 there. Those 2 double pawns weren't so effective, but still no way to win this one. OK, the bishop retreats. Anish Giri, though, I want to say this is really instructive. Ever since he got down to this endgame, which was nearly losing, he has barely looked away from the screen. He's been so focused. He's just been a model of concentration. And that's what you need to do when you're grinding out difficult endgames, when you're trying to save the draw from difficult positions.
Yeah.
And he's so close now. All he needs to do is get rid of the 2 remaining white pawns, even at the cost of the black rook.
Yeah.
And it's a draw.
And just look at the king and the rook, such sterling defenders, both of them working in tandem, just to stop those advances of those pawns. I mean, I don't think there's anything that Levon can even dream of trying.
Yeah.
OK, so he steps forward to the king. OK, well, that's going to get checked away.
Yeah, and he was shaking his head. He knows that there's no way forward anymore. Now black's rook can simply go back to attack the white pawn, the very far advanced white e-pawn. The black king can maybe just attack that pawn as well.
Yep, that's also looks great.
Black rook can just slide back, stopping the white bishop from using some squares.
That was also appealing to me as well. So, okay, the king steps forward,
Yeah.
bishop defends. Okay, now can you just harass the bishop?
Yes, I think because the bishop has no more kind of fortified squares, it has no safe squares to use. It's just too loose. You just keep attacking it. Attack this bishop now. Pin down the white king. Tie down the white king to defending its bishop. There we go. The white king can't move, so the bishop had to. And now black just needs to bring the rook to any safe square. It's attacked right now. I think any safe square will do. And now, yeah, this one is a guaranteed draw, I think.
Uh-huh. Wow.
That was a very key moment there, that the rook tied down, and you're going to see it there. Once again, the rook is tying down the white king. The white king is not allowed to be an attacker. And I move the rook again.
Yeah.
Attack the bishop.
Exactly. Anish, he's been so accurate, I think, for the last, 70 moves at this point. Ever since he got this endgame with 2 pawns down, he's defended like a lion, and this one is about to be a draw. Give another check. The white king has nowhere to hide. Don't allow white to push the g-pawn forward. That would still be a draw, but more work to do. Just keep checking.
Yep.
Why not?
And now just attack the bishop.
Yep. Check or attack the bishop. Both will do. Just attack something.
Yeah.
That's the key. When in doubt, attack something. He attacks the king, forces the king back. But, yeah.
Okay, but now is...
Maybe now you could consider taking off the white pawn with your rook. I think that is a draw just about.
Because the black king gets to the critical g7 square.
Yeah, so I think we'll see this on the board.
Yeah,
Anish Giri, he
he
does
plays it.
eliminate, and this is why you need to study your endgames. You need to know exactly what endgames are drawn and which ones aren't, and we're going to see stalemate. 1 pawn alone is not enough. Anish Giri smiles, saves the draw.
He finishes the day with a smile, Anish Giri, but this basically sums up a really bad day, a bad first day in the tournament for both Levon Aronian and Anish Giri, 2 of the very top favorites. But they've lost some games today and struggled.